I want to show you how I unpot JBL crossovers. Got some water going here. It's a phenolic spacer, and we'll go into that a little bit more. Put that in the bottom of the pot. We've got a crossover here. Somebody's already gone at this a bit. We don't have too much left other than the the capacitors in there. But let's get this. Sorry, we'll get that cooking. Basically what I have here is water, which I'm boiling, and I've dropped the crossover in there. The reason for the phenolic spacer is our flame is pretty hot. If I've got the crossover sitting directly on the bottom of the pot here and the flame hitting that, there's an awful lot of heat going directly to the metal at the bottom of the can. A couple of things. One, if you're not planning on repainting, it can cause the paint to lift and curl. Two, enough heat is going to buckle the bottom of that housing, which you don't want. And three, if you've got a component that you're going to save, in this case we're replacing all the caps, so it's just the caps which are on the bottom. I'm not too concerned about that. But if your autoformer is resting on the bottom, that kind of temperature may not be very good for that component. So that's the reason for the phenolic spacer. This is going to take a little while. Let's move over here. Talk about some other ones, other ways of doing this. Some people like to try and chip out all the wax. They will freeze the crossover, remove the top, freeze the crossover, and then start chipping away at it. And you know, whoever did this one did a pretty good job, but still you can see that it's not a very pretty housing. Looking inside, you can see where the chisel kind of slipped and started to separate a seam. So, you know, a lot of abuse when you get in there and start chiseling. Now, the other issue too, I'm going to show you this transformer, this coil. Somebody obviously slipped on this too. Got in here, cut away some of the paper. This is probably salvageable. It can be glued back together again, but still, there could be permanent damage. Now, again, a lot of people replace their coil, so that's not an issue. But the autoformer, you damage the autoformer, you're starting all over again. So anyway, I prefer cooking. And some people say it's a mess, and it can be. I've done quite a few of these. I'm getting better at them, and it's not as messy as it used to be. Some advice: do not do this inside. Your house will stink for a week, and you will make a mess on the stove and the countertop, and your wife will be furious. Don't use the family pasta pot. That was another mistake I made. Get your own. And lastly, I'm not exactly sure what this material is that these crossovers are potted in. Some people say wax. It doesn't smell like any wax I've ever smelled. This stuff stinks. So do your research. Make sure you're not going to come down with cancer 3 years after you do this. Do this outside. You know, we've got a gas oven outside we use for powder coating and things like that. We will use that. In this particular case, it's raining today, so we've got a little shed set up outside. We also have, you know, a bunch of bath fans set up in here, so we really get some good ventilation. Anyway, water boiling. You can see the wax, the stuff is starting to loose up a bit here. I may need to put this down or get somebody to hold this for me. You know, the key is to get this hot enough so your components slide out easily. The only thing I reuse in my rebuilds is the Autoformer. Those are obsolete, you can't get them anymore, so I've got to reuse those. So when I pull these things out while they're still hot, I've got a pair of gloves on, and I go at the Autoformer with a putty knife, just trying to scrape as much of the, we'll call it wax, away from that. That's the only thing I'm really concerned in saving. I don't care about the other. There's another housing I got that somebody used the freeze and ice pick method. They got it all out and cleaned it up pretty well, but take a look at, you know, what's happened to the housing here. Pretty bad shape. Some dings in the bottom. Sides are all kind of blown out. Not really pretty. I mean, I guess if this is your own and you don't care, but I've got to throw this out, and I'll have to scavenge one from a different crossover. All right, now we're going to do an LX7, and we're going to do this one a little differently. I wanted to show you, first of all, look how much taller it is. It has an extension on it. Gives you about another inch for quite a bit of components. You can see how full it is. I mean, the wax is almost up to there. So we're gonna get this in here, and I'm doing this one a little differently. Sorry, I'm not much of a, sorry about the quality of these. Filming is not my forte. All right, so you notice I've left the cover on this one. One of the things I like to do when I have a new crossover that I'm doing for the first time is I want to pull it apart intact and compare it to the JBL schematic. And the reason for that is I found some discrepancies in some of the schematics. They aren't right. I don't know why. Maybe earlier versions have been posted online or have been released from JBL, but the N2600 is one. I think everybody knows about that one, but the N2600 with the 1632 ohm switch. Anyway, so I've left the cover intact on this one. We're going to try and be very careful. I really don't want to get into repainting this one. This one isn't in too bad a shape. So if we can get everything out, it'll allow me to kind of trace things and compare it to the JBL schematic and make sure that it is what it should be, or make changes. So this should be, I think I'm going to put more water in here. All right, I'm going to leave you for now. There we are. I've got some more water in there, filled it up to the same height as the wax inside. I have a feeling this is going to take a while, boiling that much water. Got plenty of propane just in case I run out. And a cleaner workspace here, is I have a feeling this one's going to be a little challenging. Again, the phenolic spacer is down there. Can't see it, the water's so dirty now. Alright, it's been about 10 minutes. If you take a look right there, you can see the wax starting to bubble around the perimeter. So we're going to start to melt first. This isn't going to do us any good because we have that band, that lip going around. So if we try to pull it out like this, it's going to catch on that. Plus it looks like this is so jam-packed that some of these components would hit it. And in addition, I like to cook it a little longer. I really want to get that wax soft. I want it to be easy to clean off. Again, the Autoformer is probably going to be the only thing I'm saving in this. Okay, it's been another 10 minutes. You can see our wax is starting to kind of soften up and ooze out around the sides, but look at that. Oops, I'm sorry. Soften up around the sides, but you get in the middle, it's still solid as a rock. So we have a ways to go. Okay, we're about half an hour in. Water's boiling. Wax is softening, but still, not very much. Got a ways to go, and I'm worried we're starting to run out of propane here, so we'll see how this goes. You know, there's probably guys on Lansing Heritage or DIY Audio, Audio Karma, those sites that are kind of watching this and going, that's not the way I do it. And there are many different ways of doing this. You know, if you're looking at this and going, I'm not buying a propane tank or a camping heater or a, $40 pot. At least that's what the replacement cost me after the wife yelled at me for ruining the first one. And if you're only doing a pair of these, this may not make sense. This is the easiest for me. I do a lot of these, and although it is a little time consuming, for me it's just easier than other methods. But if you want to look into chipping or some other methods, jump on any one of those sites. Everybody there are very helpful, all hobbyists. I rebuild crossovers, I get paid for it. Not everybody wants to pay me to do it, and every now and then I run into somebody that wants to tackle it themselves. And this is the biggest question I get, is how do I get those components out of the potted crossovers? I try and explain to them, and I thought, maybe it's just best I do a video here. You know, anybody that wants to tackle this on their own, I applaud them. You know, this is the hobby for me, so I love talking with people and sharing ideas. And a lot of guys out there know a heck of a lot more than I do, but for those newcomers who want to tackle it themselves, I think that's great. And I'm definitely here to offer whatever advice I can. More about how I would usually do this if it was a crossover that I was sure of the schematic. What I would do is I would remove the cover. I would just cut away all of these wires and remove, leave the resistors on the cover plate. I'm going to replace those anyway, but for this process I would just basically cut all the wires, leave them as long as they can, maybe a little wire there so it's a little easier to take apart with your soldering iron. You're going to be saving the lugs and the screws. Be very careful with the switch. If you can see in there, that's a 3-position 2-pole switch, and the fiber board that sort of holds it together, a plastic, is very brittle. Now I have replacement switches for these. I had a company make them for me. And I'm going to replace the switch on these, so I'm not too concerned about it. But if you're going to reuse yours, be careful when you're pulling it apart. They do break easily. Get in there with your solder sucker and carefully pull those wires off. You know, worst comes to worst, if you can't get it off, just cut it flush and then just solder your wire to it. The last thing you want to do is break your switch. Because I only have about 80 of them, and I don't know how many of them I want to sell. And kind of break up the wax, move things around. I found my Autoformer. That's my treasure. Gotta be careful about it. It's right on the top there. Kind of push some of the wax away from it. Oops, sorry. Anyway, it's getting there. It's kind of getting there. LX7, it's all coming out. Look at all that. Okay, put it down right here. And as I mentioned, my goal is to try and trace all the wires. And the only one I really want to clean up is the Autoformer. And let's kind of get in here and a little metal came out there. Let's carefully push it back in. Still pretty soft. Oops. Get this stuff out of here. Trying to be very careful of these leads, these wires. Look at the parts that I glue. Top and the side. So pull this over, clean rag, get some of the acetone. Pretty clean. The acetone is going to evaporate pretty quick because that's hot. Oops. Let's get this side too. Okay, so that's all I need to do for this. That's all I really care about. The rest I can kind of come in afterwards and clean it up, and then I'm going to just sort of, this is actually easier to clean. Seems like the Autoformer seems to have the bulk of the stuff glued, stuck to it. Even the other coil in here looks pretty good. Anyway, you can see how well these are cleaning up, and this is sort of one of the advantages to really letting it sit in there for a while. These are actually cleaning up easier than the Autoformer did, which is kind of unfortunate. I think maybe because these were closer to the bottom. Right. This was the one cap that was at the top, and you can see it's a little more gummy, so we'll call it. Let's again, I'm not too worried about that coil, but as long as we're here. Oh yeah, God, that's cleaning up much better than the Autoformer. Oh, and it's much hotter too. It's pretty hot to touch. There's the Autoformer cleaned up that nice. Oh well. Okay, so there we have it. Components are all separated. It's going to be pretty easy to trace the wiring. Kind of. And we have kept the faceplate pretty clean. So now we're going to come back here to the, let's do it on this side so you can film it. So we're going to empty out the pot that's still cooking. And this stuff is really pretty liquidy now. I'm going to use rags for two reasons. One, it's bloody hot, but two, I don't want to get any of this wax. Okay, here we go. So up, and then so I'm going to put it down right over here on the wood. I'm going to start cleaning. See how ugly it is? This is deep also. This is going to be a little more challenging to clean. Smell. Yeah, sorry, that's acetone. Don't tell mommy. Let's not use the rag that's soaked in acetone. Okay, getting as much as we can while it's still hot. I cleaned up pretty well. Pull your putty knife off. Nice and clean. Let's get in here and just do some final cleaning around the inside corners. Interesting, again, we've got the same sort of joint sealer on the inside corners that I found in the other crossover. I think it was old LX5. So we won't worry about that because it's not the wax, it's something else. The sides cleaned up pretty well. Okay, so let's see if we've got a clean rag in the group here. Back with the acetone. Still fairly warm, so this is really doing a good job removing everything. Okay, there's our inside. Sealant in the corners. But they're all pretty nice and clean. Now, gosh, I can't remember. I'll have to pay a little more attention with the other LX7. I don't think the bottom was that bad. And it probably had something to do with it was sitting in the water for probably an hour. So I do have some wax around the outside, which I could clean up, but quite honestly, I think I'm going to sand and paint these. You know, I think a lot of this paint was loose and the water just didn't help. So there's that. I'll grab this. And there is our LX7. See if you can see it all there. All the components that come out. There's our Autoformer. All of our caps are coiled. And once this all sort of dries up, I'll be able to trace the wiring, and then of course I'm going to take it all apart. And the only thing I'm going to be saving is that. And maybe I'll do something with the schematic if it doesn't match. We can talk about that. There you have it. Faceplate should be pretty clean. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. No wax or anything on it. I'm going to let things just sit for a little while, clean my hands, and we're going to tackle number 2. All right, this is the second LX7 phenolic spacer in the boiling water. Drop this one in. As I mentioned, usually I take the covers off. We left it on for the first one because we wanted to be able to trace the wires and compare it to the schematic, and that came out in one piece, so we're good there. So this one, we went ahead and removed the cover, and that's going to make pulling this out a little easier. I mean, typically you can grab all the wires when it gets soft and yank them all out. We're about ready to pull everything out. There we go. Wow. All right. Now, this time the only thing we care about is our Autoformer. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we've already cut all the wires loose. So it's coming apart much easier. We already have the other LX7 apart, which we're going to use for matching up the schematic. So this one, we're just going to go for the parts we want. And I apologize, I was looking through some of these other videos and I'm calling coils transformers, and transformers coils, and calling capacitors coils, and I'm trying to talk and do something at the same time, so I sometimes get things jumbled up. Alright, so this one's cleaning up nicely. I think this one is probably positioned a little differently than the last one. So it seems to have got a little hotter. And I'm going to close the door. That dash is making too much noise. So this one must have got a little hotter. It seems to be cleaning up a little easier. The wax or whatever is coming off a little nicer, cleaning up a little better than the last one. Don't care about any of the other components. I might clean up the other coil. It hasn't set up too much, just in case somebody else can use it. Okay, so put it down over there. At this point, I can take the glove off. Let's some of our acetone. And the part that is going to get glued to the housing, the bottom, and one of the sides. That side. Might as well here, might as well wipe down some of this other stuff. Well, this is going to be pretty compared to the last one we did. Let's see. Quite often they have model numbers on the transformers. Sorry, Autoformers. I like to uncover those, although surprisingly I find a lot of the numbers are the same. pulled some out of an LX13 that had the same number as a LX5. And after testing them, maybe somebody had installed the wrong coil in them. Nope, they were different. Yeah, right. Alright, the rest of this will kind of flake off when it dries. So we'll put that aside. And just for kicks, we'll clean this other coil up just a little bit. Just in case somebody out there is looking for a LX7 coil and doesn't want to go with the new air coils. See the model number on the bottom there. Alright, I think that's enough. We'll put that over there. Don't care about the rest, but we do to do the housing still. Let's get some room here. Okay. There we go. And over here. Oh boy, it's filling up. Oh crap. Wow, okay. Maybe get another cam. Alright, so there we go. Let's get our wagon here. This is our wagon. So pretty hot and pretty deep, so I don't want to burn my hand, but I want to get as much of this stuff out so it's all nice and soft, liquidy. What is wrong with that dog? Do you know you're in here? Do you want to come in here? It's not bad. Alright, let's switch to the acetone now. Still a little more on the bottom I want to get. I'm going to put in the cutting knife up a bit. There we go. You can see in there. A little more acetone. Okay, not bad. Inside, take a look at the sides. Kind of cleaned up nicely. Should be able to glue my Autoformer in there nicely to the bottom and the side. I got it all cleaned off. Now let's look at the outside. These sat in a lot longer than what an LX5 would, and it hasn't done the housing that great. What's happened around the side, you know, I've done probably about 4 or 5 crossovers tonight. There's a lot of wax in the water. It probably would have been smart for me to empty the water out in between, but considering how long it takes to get that water boiling, I didn't feel like doing it. So I've got a little more wax to clean up off of this one. I think it's irrelevant because I think we looked at the other one, the LX7. You can see the bottom did much better on this one. So I think the paint was in pretty bad shape on the other one, and the 45 minutes in the pot, it didn't do it any good. It all lifted off. But since I've got to paint that one, I'm going to paint this one too. So, and look at that. You know, as I take the wax off, it takes the paint right off. So it's an old crossover, and it did sit in the water a long time. Usually doesn't take this long with LX5s or LX13s, and the paint does much better. But you know, this thing was filled up to there. That's a lot. A lot of components. Take a look down there, much more than what you're going to find in an LX5 or an LX13, and that's why they had to add an inch onto it. And it's surprising looking at all the old brochures, it didn't cost that much more if you were to buy one back in the day. Alright, maybe show them the mess one last time. Icky crossovers, which will go into a bag if any of you collectors want them, or wax, which is bubbling over, and the pot, which we can now finally turn off. Alright, here we go.
Okay.
What's that?